Gai ddymuno croeso cynnes iawn I bob un ohonoch sydd yma heno I Fachynlleth. Fachynlleth, prif dinas hanesyddol Cymru, ymrodd y fi. O cwm lle bathwyd yr ymadrodd technoleg amgen, lle mae afon Dyfi a'i heogaid yn llifo lawr o Blaid Bryn Dyfi I gwrdd â ni wrth ei bontydd, sawl rwan. Tref Barchnad lle mae ffermwyr defaid a masnachwr yn cwrdd ei gilydd. Croesffordd bwysig wedi nodi gan ein cloc enwog sy'n gysylltu Gogledd a De Cymru, lle sy'n annwyl i'w thregolion a'r rhai sy'n teithio drwyddo. Diolch yn fawr I chi gyd am ddod. Chydig iawn o waith cadw neu housekeeping, mae'r allanfeydd brys yn y cefn ac wrth yr ochr fan hyn. Mae'r toiledau cyhoeddus allan o'r drws lawr y corridor ffordd 'na a fyny'r stair. Na ni'n meddwl. Bethan ydw I. Mi fyddai'n cadeiro'r hystings heno. Mae'r stiwardiaid Kim, Norma, Judith a pawb sy'n gwisgo high-vis yma i'ch helpu chi. Mae yna 2 microffon, un fan hyn ac un yn y stafell I chi ofyn i'ch cwestiynau.
For you to ask questions. Anybody needs any help at all? Let us know. Ask one of the ones in the high-vis jackets. If you have any problems, we'll try and come and help you. You all come here to this evening regarding the hystings to see candidates for our constitution Montgomery Glyndŵr, and they present themselves to us and explain how they would represent us. So it's some rules regarding timings. They have time to answer your questions and listening to each other and respecting each other. Nobody will have the same opinion as their neighbour on everything, but we are lucky to live in a democracy. We can all get along despite perhaps differing opinions, maybe even look beyond that to the many things we have in common. And we are all here to inform ourselves, ask questions which hold those who represent us to account, and hopefully improve that democracy. Now, each candidate will have 2 minutes to initially present themselves. You are welcome to use your thoughts about what you love about this area and what you would change in your introductions. Okay? So I'd like to ask them my right-hand side and move over to the right.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Steve Witherden. I'm the Labour candidate. I'm 43. I live in Akrabaya in the north of our constituency. I won't speak too much more about myself, the normal opening statement, the normal speech. These guys have heard it 5 times already. And if anyone's had a leaflet posted or pushed through the door, they'll already have, probably know a little bit about me already. So I will speak directly to, the format that we're using this evening, something we love about the constituency and something we would like to see changed. So something that I love about the constituency would be the nature, our nature. I've always had a deep love for native species of animals, plants. I remember, walking around the beautiful landscapes of North and Mid Wales with my dad, and learning the names of the different birds, recognising them by their call, differentiating conifers and Norway spruce from a Scots pine, and now I love doing that with my own children who are 10 and 14. We've got some beautiful streams, brooks. I was thinking of. We recently had to write an article for the Chronicle, one of the constituency's media outlets, and I spoke about a walk up the Trefnant Brook, which is a tributary of the Dee. and and all of the beautiful, mainly brown trout with unique markings on their flanks, and showing them to my children. What I would like to see changed, our constituency sadly has been affected by 14 years of Tory cronyism, chumocracy, corruption, and I would like to see less food banks. I'm a teacher. I teach children from this constituency. I see them coming to school hungry every day. It's disgusting. I would like to see food poverty stop. I would like to see an end to the tenfold rise in food banks we've had in the last 10 years. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Oliver Lewis. I'm 37 and your Reform UK candidate. My voice is, I'm afraid, Oxford English. That's because I was born and brought up near Oxford. But appearances can be deceiving because I am from a very proud Welsh family. My grandfather was briefly, it's not a record you hold for very long, the oldest living Welshman, and all of my family in Wales, who are mostly from Carmes, are fluent Welsh speakers. And I know a couple of words, Mangi, Tadgi, and so on. Anyhow, what I love most about this county, I think, is the preservation of Welsh culture. I don't think it's recognised enough how unique it is that Wales has such confidence in its national culture. Rowan Williams, some of you may have heard of, I'm sure, former Archbishop of Canterbury, he always said that to understand the Celtic world, you need to turn the map on its side and look at the peninsulas to see the survival of Celtic traditions in Brittany, in Cornwall, the peninsulas of Wales, far west Wales, and also, of course, the Hebrides. So I think it is extraordinary that Wales has been able to preserve its culture. Like I said, I'm a descendant of a very proud Welsh family. So that is what I value most about our county. But what I'd like to improve, two things. First, our infrastructure. I very frequently travel the road between Montgomery and Mac. I've just obviously done it again this afternoon, and I can't believe that there are very dangerous sections of the road where there are no crash barriers. It just seems so easy for me that somebody could accidentally come off there. So definitely our infrastructure. I'd also like to see the railways upgraded, electrified from Wolverhampton to Aberystwyth. And I'd also like to see a sleeper service to Pwllheli, because we've got lots of spare sleeper carriages in Britain at the moment, and I feel we could have a sleeper service from London Euston to Pwllheli to benefit the tourism industry. Thank you very much for listening. Vote Reform UK.
Good evening. Thanks very much for inviting me here. I'm Jeremy Brignall-Thorpe, and I'm standing for the Green Party. You can probably tell I'm not originally from Wales. My parents moved here when I was 16, and I did my A-levels in Newtown School. I went away to university and spent some years in London and Coventry, but Mid-Wales drew me back, and I came back in 1995 and have been here ever since, and I will stay here until I die. It's, well, obviously the landscape, but also the sense of community. My parents, when they came to Newtown, they very quickly became part of the community of Newtown. And I'm now living in Montgomery, and Montgomery has an absolutely fantastic community. I don't think you could find better anywhere, where we had been made welcome straight away, and there's a real sense of community spirit. So that's something that I think is unique around here. What I'd like to change most, I'm living in well, obviously I'd like to see that we take climate change seriously. That really is the biggest priority of all. As a stepping stone to that, the big weakness around here, one of the weaknesses, is public transport. We just have, I live in a village where there is no bus that comes through, so we need a much better public transport system, much better buses, so we need to invest a lot in that and make sure that we can manage without so much of a public car use. So that's really what I'd like to see happen around here. Thank you.
Wel, diolch yn fawr am y gwahoddiad I gallu dod I siarad â chi heno. Thank you very much. It's great. here this evening. I'm really looking forward to answering your questions. So my name's Glyn. I've lived in Montgomeryshire all of my life, other than my 3 years at university. I live just over the hill in Llanidloes, some 30 minutes away. And it's not just about, the best thing about living in Montgomeryshire, similar to what Jeremy said, is actually not the rolling hills and the landscapes, though they are beautiful, but actually the people. The people make it a very special place to live indeed. There's a Welsh phrase, Mwynder Maldwyn, which sort of refers to the kindness of the people of Montgomeryshire, and that's something which is true in Llanidloes as it is in Machynlleth and other market towns across the county. But we're not without our problems in the county, and the primary one that I'd like to see us be able to reverse is actually the problem of losing our young people. And that's something I feel really passionately about. I was very odd in one way, I suppose, in some ways, when I came back from after university back to this area to live here. And lots of my friends are still living elsewhere. And that's not because they don't love this area and didn't want to live here, but they don't see the economic opportunities for themselves here, or the opportunity to buy a house and start a family. And that's something really worrying that should concern us all, or else we're destined to become a retirement county. The other thing is the health service. And I think we get a really raw deal in this part of the world with regards to the health service. We see the failures of the Welsh Labour government in Wales, but also we see, when we have to go out of county for our services, the failures of the health service in England too. So what would I do to address this? Well, the big thing we've been campaigning on in the east of the county is a new Newtown Hospital, the North Powing Wellbeing Hub, which was promised us by Welsh Government years ago and still hasn't been delivered on. So if elected, I'd be a fierce advocate for making sure that we can get that hospital built. But also, for the people on this side of the county, it's also about seeing the upgrades to Bronglais Hospital and making sure that as many services as possible can get delivered locally there. Diolch yn fawr.
Diolch, ac mi wna i ymateb yn Gymraeg. Felly,
We're here to say what I feel about this area, like a county councillor, and who lives in the Dyfi Valley. I think it's a privilege. I'm very, very fortunate to live, and generations of my family have lived in this area. I don't take first place in, and people have left this area, and depopulation is a problem here, a big problem. We have to ensure that this is a challenge that we have to face. Exactly as one thing that I'd like to change after 10 years of a Tory Conservative and it's really real right-wing Tories, and they have isolated people in communities, and they want to see people. So it's cooperating. I think you can see people cooperating instead of people being really bad-mannered, and we want to see people wanting to be working together, being loving to each other, and especially after Brexit. But it's not only Machynlleth, but the whole of Wales and to the islands of this country.
Diolch, Elwyn, diolch pawb. Nawr at gwestiynau. Mae gennym ni gymysgedd heno o gwestiynau o'r llawr, a fydd yn cael ei ddarllen gan y mynychwyr. Mae gennym ni hefyd restr o gwestiynau a gyflwynir gan pobl nad oedd yn gallu bod yma heno. Fydd yn gallu cael ei darllen gan un o'r stafodiaid.
They'll be announced by people from the audience, from the register. What would you do to ensure that people feel confident in you and be able to to increase confidence in you as a politician and your party and general as politicians.
Thank you. I think the crisis in the British system of government isn't as accepted as it needs to be. Britain obviously doesn't have, as I'm sure many of you know, a written constitution. Many of our standards of government are predicated on convention and precedent. That's simply not acceptable, I think, in the 21st century. I often joke, I teach history and politics in the universities. I often joke to my students, I'd be very happy if we could drag Britain into the 20th century, and perhaps in 50 years someone can drag it into the 21st, because our system of government really is Victorian. I think where you had politicians of the standard of, say, Shirley Williams or Dennis Healey, that wasn't a problem. Unfortunately, with the likes of Boris Johnson, you see a collapse in standards. So it really is a crisis. We need to restore trust in not just our political class, but also in our system of government. So reform is all about radical institutional change, notably with abolition of the House of Lords. The Labour Party have been promising to abolish the House of Lords since 1935. I think by this point we can agree they're not going to do it. So it's an institutional reset is what reform stands for. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Yes. Well, I think first let's say that from the point of view of the Green Party, I don't think anyone joins the Green Party and really works hard for the Green Party for the fame and fortune that you're going to get from it. Everyone in the Green Party is passionate about trying to make a world that is habitable for our children in 20 or 30 years' time, and that is really a struggle sometimes in the current sort of climate of politics. And I think we would go on the reputation of the people that are there already. Caroline Lucas, who is our only MP for the last 10 years, has a fantastic reputation. She probably has the best reputation of integrity in the House of Commons. If I could achieve half that, I would be proud to do that. So I think we would go on our reputation. And secondly, in the House of Commons, there are things that are wrong. The lobbying that goes on is quite terrible down there, and that needs to be cleaned up. There needs to be much more transparency about who is backing the various MPs down there. So that's what I would campaign to change in the House of Commons.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for the question. I'm as exasperated as I'm sure lots of you are in the audience with the sort of crisis and scandal that we've seen over the past 14 years of Conservative government. I would say that there's a much more fundamental problem with the way that we do politics in this country, though, and in particular, I'm talking about safe seats and their poison on our politics. And that's why I'm a really firm believer in proportional representation, so that we can improve the accountability, the link between you, the voters, and politicians, so that actually politicians are more accountable to you, the voters. And I suppose there are lots of people probably in this room who are in favour of PR. And my plea to you, if you actually believe in electoral reform, then it's really important that you vote for a party that's committed to it. You know, the Labour Party has been going on about electoral reform when they're in opposition for lots and lots of years, and yet when they get to government with a stonking majority, as it looks they're going to in this election, they forget about it. They abandon it because fundamentally the two-party system favours them. So if you want to improve our politics for the future, you've got to vote for a party that believes in reforming our political system. Thanks very much.
When I stood as a county councillor for Powys, one of the reasons was because I was fed up with Powys Council, the culture that existed there, and I firmly believe in the need for openness and transparency. That is why I have supported whistleblowers numerous times, I think they are fundamental and key to any democratic institution, as we've seen recently with the fiasco with the post office. That's why I've stood up against those in power in Powys, in dodgy deals about selling one farm for 5 million to one private company, or about dodgy deals with tarmac and private money up around Llanfyllin, and that's why I've been challenging them with an issue around a school in Newtown recently, because openness and transparency and standing up and be counted is fundamental, and that's what I would do as an MP also.
Absolutely right to ask this question. It's one of the main reasons why I've put myself forward for all of this. I'm the only person sat up here who isn't a career politician, the only person sat up here who's never stood for elected public office before. I was motivated to do it. One of the things that I'll speak about some of the other things later on this evening, I'm sure, but one of the main things that motivated me was, as I mentioned in my opening speech, the corruption, the cronyism, the misogyny, the COVID PPE scandal, Michelle Mone, nurses being sent out there in the pandemic with PPE that didn't work, didn't protect them because it had been given to their rich friends. Absolutely disgusting. So, this is one of the main reasons why I put myself forward for this. Actually had a funny conversation on a doorstep the other day where someone said, who's the tactical vote? Who's the tactical vote? I've had this glossy leaflet and this glossy leaflet. And I said, don't believe any of us. Don't believe any of us. Do your own research. Go online. There are many reputable websites that do polling and tactical vote. Do your own research. Don't believe politicians.
Okay. I have a question from the floor, I believe, from Andy Rowland.
Bear in mind that the next 5 years will be absolutely critical for the world and for us who live in it, for the climate and nature emergencies, not only legally with the UK commitments for climate and also internationally with international agreements on biodiversity and nature. If elected, what will you do to ensure sufficient and constructive action on the climate and nature emergency?
Did you all get that?
I think probably the most important thing, obviously we need more action from the government and all round. But I think probably the most important thing is for the government to start telling the truth. Until the government starts telling the truth on climate change so that people realise what the consequences are and what is going to happen in the future, people are going to sit back. At the moment they're promised that, we can solve it all with technical fixes and you don't need to change your behaviour and everything will be all right, don't worry about it. But that is not the case. We do need to start taking this seriously, and people will need to understand what the consequences are. And at the moment, there's a conspiracy between the government and the media to try and cover it up. So we need to make sure the government starts actually telling us what the IPCC scientists are telling us, and really emphasising the importance of taking this action for the sake of our children and grandchildren. I think that's the one single thing that could really make a difference, and because we all need to take action. But at the moment, there is no momentum for that because we're all given a sense of a sort of reassurance that everything is going to be okay. So I think that's what I would do.
Thanks so much for the question. It's an incredibly important issue, and as a young person, I feel especially passionate about it because I feel as though this is my future, and people who come after me's future as well. I know we're going to have to bear the brunt of it. The Lib Dems are committed to net zero by 2045 and making sure that we get the percentage of our energy made up with renewables up to 90% by 2030. We've made some great progress as a country so far, but we've got a heck of a long way to go, and we really need to ramp that up. How would we do it? One of the key pledges, which I think has in fact now become Labour Party policy, but the Lib Dems were there first, was actually a one-off Robin Hood tax on the oil and gas giants, who've profiteered massively with the spike of oil and gas prices, which have put a huge amount of strain on people's family finances. And that tax would go into paying for our research and development in renewable energy so that we can invest, cut carbon, increase our energy security, but also cut bills for working families as well. Thanks very much.
Dwi'n meddwl bod yna 3 peth yn arbennig. Hoffwn i weld yn digwydd. Peth cyntaf, mae rhaid cefnogi mesur natur, so Nature Bill. Ail bwynt dwi'n meddwl sy'n angen wneud ydy o ran y sector amaeth a defnydd tir, ond mae rhaid gwneud hynny efo'r pobl sy'n gwybod ac yn defnyddio'r tir a'r sector amaeth, achos heb hynny wneith dim byd lwyddo. A mae rhaid sicrhau bod y meithwyr yn ganolog i'r broses hynny. A'r trydydd peth dwi'n meddwl ydy efo stoc tai. Mae stoc tai Cymru'n arbennig o hen ac mewn cyflwr gwael iawn. Mae 35% o allbynnau carbon y llygredd yn dod allan o stoc tai ac felly mae angen cynllun adfer ac ynysu sylweddol o ran codi safonau y stoc tai yma yng Nghymru.
Can you remind me what the next question is, please, Kim? Is it one? Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
Thank you. We have to advance the transition to net zero. I think the big problem with all of our utility companies is the fact they were privatised in the 1980s. This might surprise my critics in the room and the heckler at the front, but the Reform Party is committed to reversing the privatisation of the natural monopolies. So the electricity industry, the railways and the privatised water boards would come back into public ownership under a Reform government. Would you mind just, people haven't come here to listen to your heckling, they've come to listen to the candidates, okay? So please have less of that, okay? I've been asked a question and I'm answering it. There's no point in me continuing an answer if you're going to heckle. They have not come to listen to you. So we need to reverse the privatisation of the natural monopolies. Reform is committed to doing to that. I'm very passionate about plastics consumption, particularly single-use plastics. I think we ought to have more bans and prohibitions on single-use plastics. I think the ban on plastic bags has been a terrific success. I think we need to see more of that. I also advocate for much stricter controls on water pollution. That sort of feeds into the fact that when we privatised the water boards, the government lost control over what the water boards did. So once they're renationalised, the government can then direct the water boards to ensure that water standards are maintained. Finally, I totally agree with Owen on insulation, particularly in public buildings. I notice in this very school, the windows are still single glazed, so there's lots to be done. Yeah, we're all part of this journey.
So Oliver and myself may be wearing a nearly identical shirt, but we do have very, very different views on this. So this was another thing I was hoping I'd have the opportunity to speak about. My family's originally from Surrey in South London. The whole reason why I live here is because my dad moved up here in the 1970s. He was a founder member of the Centre for Alternative Technology. So, you know, green issues are really, really close to my heart. Labour has a plan to begin addressing the climate catastrophe. I use the term climate catastrophe. I don't think it's a crisis, but nor do I think that we should become too disheartened and think that it's not too late to turn things around. We should be taking action. We should be doing things. The Green New Deal will introduce Great British Energy, publicly owned, a huge expansion in renewables, tidal, solar, wind, bring down utilities bills. And what's the alternative? It's Rishi Sunak giving more North Sea oil exploration licenses and totally jettisoning net zero. We can't have that. The planet cannot have that.
A very quick comeback. The Labour Party is not going to reverse energy privatisation, okay? The structure of the energy is going to remain. He's accepted I can have a reply. Then Great British Energy is not renationalisation. Only reform will renationalise the electricity industry. He agreed to it.
We did agree at the beginning that they could have a short comeback if necessary.
92% of their funding, I believe, comes from the fossil fuel industry.
The next question.
So, is it fair that our generation faces a lifetime of debt to get university education? How will you ensure that students of all backgrounds have equal opportunity to an affordable education?
Sort of kind of apt that you've come to the Liberal Democrat candidate to ask that first. I'm one of those young people, just showing some sort of humility about my party's position on that. I mean, I'm one of those young people who are saddled with tens of thousands worth of pounds of debt. I suppose the only thing I would say is that I don't think it's a helpful narrative framing it around debt, because actually it's only a tax on what you earn over £28,000, and it's a sort of harmful narrative to talk about it as debt, as though it's a credit card bill, or I'm being honest. I'm being honest about my view. Anyway, and I think actually, in terms of what the Welsh Liberal Democrats did in Wales under Kirsty Williams, they massively increased the student bursaries that Welsh students receive. They massively increased the student bursaries that Welsh students receive, and actually, comparing my time at university to some of my friends who were under the English system, they had very little money to live on. Often they had to take on part-time jobs to supplement their student loan, whereas I wasn't in that position because we have a much fairer system in Wales.
Our young people are facing the hardest of times. Anybody that wants to buy a house in this area faces huge, huge pressures. That's on top of debts, and yes, huge debts, tens of thousands after going to university. How are they supposed to succeed in the coming years? I think it's a fundamental principle here in Wales that yes, there's a better support package than in England. But having said that, one of the key issues we have is that funding formula for Wales is not appropriate to our needs. The Barnett formula needs to change. Lord Barnett himself said that had to change in the 1970s, and here we are over 50 years later, still in the same hole. That whoever's in power has to fundamentally change that to reflect the needs here in Wales, and then we can, as a basic fundamental principle, support our young people that want a good education system. Because at the end of the day, if we don't invest in our young people, what future is there?
Yeah, I think it's all part of a wider attack on young people. I think that the young are one of the most disenfranchised demographics, after 14 years of Tory rule. And as Glyn said, the first part of it was Lib Dem Tory coalition. I think they have been, among the most disenfranchised groups. So, housing market, if you want to buy a house now, you're going to, if you're lucky, it'll happen when you're in your 40s. But even renting, to go out and rent, that is absolutely horrific. The availability, the price increases. Social housing, if you're on a social housing, waiting list, huge issues there. Labour do things better. Elwyn said it, Elwyn said it himself. The system we have here in Wales is better than the system they have in England, and we want to see young people enfranchised. Votes for 16 and 17-year-olds in Westminster elections. We've done it in the Senedd. We need to roll it out across the UK. Thank you.
You won't be surprised to hear me say a plague on all your houses, because, of course, tuition fees were introduced by the Labour Party. I was in the sixth form when top-up fees were introduced in 2004. People in the audience might remember there was a huge backbench rebellion. The bill almost fell, but Tony Blair had such a large majority he forced it through. They were warned repeatedly at the time this was going to be a disaster. The biggest tragedy of the student loan scandal and mess is that most of the student loans aren't paid back. Half of the loans that are extended are never repaid. Reform's policy isn't to cancel the debt, but it's to cancel the interest. So we will end the payment of interest, which is usurious. If you look at some of the rates that are being charged now, far above the level of inflation. When tuition fees were first introduced, they were introduced at virtually at an interest-free rate. So we need to end that and revert to the old system. I would also say the Conservatives, also there is no Conservative candidate in this election, but the Conservatives in the early 1990s adopted this policy of trying to force everybody to go to university, so that primary school teachers who normally would have done a BEd and would have gone to a teacher training college, and police officers would have to have a degree, but Reform would prefer more vocational training in the tradition that we used to have.
Yeah, I found myself quite challenged about this question. The Green Party manifesto says that we would push to cancel the tuition fees and for students to not be burdened with that debt. I just struggle somewhat with that, because the problem is that we now have vastly more students that are going through the university system than when I was going through university. It's now sort of 50% or so, and therefore I do worry about the affordability of it. I've got two sons that went through recently, and I'm on sort of charity sector wages for the last 15 years, so I've not been able to support them, and they've managed to go through and are coping with the debt they've taken on. As others have mentioned, the Welsh system is more generous than the English system. I think that I would need more convincing that we could afford to remove that completely. I'd agree with Oliver that the interest that's charged on it is ludicrous, that should be sort of a zero or negligible interest instead of the rates they're charging now. And I think we do need to look carefully at the sums, because it needs to be affordable. I would also agree with Oliver that we could do with more vocational training too, rather than everyone having a university degree. But yeah, the Green Party manifesto says we would cancel it or remove the tuition charges. I think we do need to look carefully at how we can afford it.
Just to clarify, we did agree beforehand that candidates could have a right to a quick, reasonable right to apply if needed. Quick and reasonable.
Yeah, I don't like this concept of vocational academics. Speaking from my own experiences, I was statemented dyslexic as a child, and I was completely illiterate until the age of 11, and it was. I actually did my degree in English literature, believe it or not, and that was because of a teacher who inspired me and got me into literature. And I just think, yeah, if you sort of get into a situation like in some other countries where they sort of segregate people when they're children, saying, "Oh, you're not destined for anything academic. You must go into this stream." I've always been really, really uncomfortable with that, and I like the system we have where you can switch, or you can be a late learner or a late developer, as I was, and I think we should always keep that open. I don't think we should be segregating children into different streams based on their perceived ability at a given time. Thank you.
Okay. The next question. Ready? Excellent.
I actually handed my question in, so I'm not sure how I'm going to. I was asked to ask. Right, I will say it now, unless you can find it. Can you find it? Yeah. I think it's more precise that way. Yeah. I think. I don't know why. Because I'm sitting in the front like this. You see, I followed the rules. Okay, thank you. Taking account of the economy of this constituency, do you think that it's important for Wales to change its relationship with Westminster? In what way, and what is the most urgent change to make?
Quite appropriate. Quite appropriate. Yeah, na I ateb go. Oes, mae rhaid newid, mae angen newid, nid jyst yng Nghymru, ond yn y ynysoedd yma yn gyfan gwbl.
These United Islands. There needs to be fair play between the various countries in the UK. There's more spending in the southeast of England, and the conservative element And we have to ensure that we have fair play, especially with the Baronets formula, as I mentioned, and fair play with the Crown Estates, like in the Scotland, and it would, for Wales, we have a much better way of actually raising funds and what have you. There's more radical things that can be done, but in the next period of the Westminster, it needs to be much more radical.
Yes, so I do think that the current devolution settlement needs to be looked at. I myself favour much greater devolution, much greater powers to Wales. I think, you know, anyone who's heard Gordon Brown speak on this, I think he's very close to where we need to be moving. We have in our manifesto a recommendation to create a Council of Nations and Regions to give, you know, more power. You know, a lot of this is laid out in the recent commission in the constitutional future of Wales. But also in the manifesto, Labour are committed to, if we win, investing an extra £195 million in public services in Wales that the Conservatives are not committed to. Thank you.
So I know we're all agreed on this panel that the short-term objective has to be securing the Barnett consequentials in relation to HS2. That is just an essential ambition, I think, for all of us. The second, of course, is the broader point around how I think the Northern Irish and the Scottish have a much better deal from devolution than Wales does. I don't think Wales has a strong enough voice in Westminster and Whitehall. I think it's often forgotten about. Part of that is linked to the fact that Scotland always had a greater level of devolution than Wales. Some of you may be aware that Scotland's always had its own legal system, for instance. Why can't Wales have its own legal system separate from that in England? Clearly, the infrastructure point is appalling. That, again, I think plays the point that there hasn't been a strong enough voice in Westminster to say it is simply unacceptable that, for instance, Wales until 2020 didn't have a single mile of electrified railway line. That was only rectified in 2020. Until 2020, Wales was the only other country in Europe, other than Albania, not to have a single mile of electrified railway line. So clearly, the standards are very low. We need to bring them up. In the British system of government, the Treasury makes all the decisions. There need to be some very powerful conversations with Treasury officials.
Thanks. It's quite an interesting question. Just taking a step back slightly, one has to be careful what you're wishing for here. I'm generally very much in favour of devolution at the moment because I quite like the Welsh government and I'm not so keen on the Westminster government. But if we had a Green government in Westminster and a Conservative government in Cardiff, I would probably not like devolution very much. So we don't know necessarily that the current sort of separation of governments is going to be the same indefinitely. In general, I am very much in favour of countries working together. The Green Party was pro-Europe and anti-Brexit, and that's all about working together with our neighbours in Europe. I see the Wales-England relationship as not dissimilar to that. If we had a wise and compassionate government in England and the same in Wales, I would want us to be working very closely together. It's all very much coloured by what particular governments you have in each sort of location. But in general, I am very much in favour of devolution. It's been a very good thing. The Labour government has done some wonderful things in terms of the Welfare of Future Generations Act and our recycling targets. So, yeah, there's a lot to be said for it.
Well, I suppose I'd just like to respond, if I may, just briefly to Jeremy. I suppose he posed the question, why is devolution good and why is it good in and of itself? And I suppose my answer to that would be that I believe that decisions taken closer to people are ultimately more often better decisions, basically. And And I think that's why I'm in favour of devolution. But devolution of powers, actually, I agreed with a lot of what Elwyn said about devolving justice. That's Lib Dem policy too to Wales. But actually, devolution of powers shouldn't just stop at Cardiff Bay. In fact, we know in this part of the world that actually lots of decisions taken in Cardiff Bay can be very, very bad indeed for this part of the world. And actually, it's about devolving powers further from Welsh Government to our local councils, from our county council to town and community councils as well. So we need to devolve powers closer to people. And I'll just say on the independence point, because I feel like this is where this question is vaguely going, I would just give a little mark of caution for some people who advocate on behalf of independence. I think people who advocate on behalf of it too often fall into that sort of Brexiteer trap of treating independence as though it would be some sort of silver bullet for all of Wales's problems. It wouldn't be a silver bullet. In fact, it would cause... There are lots of unanswered questions with regards to currency, border, and what we would do with our taxation system and our form of government as well.
I want to come back to a point Steve made, in actual fact, and I don't do this often in hustings, but I would say I welcome your enthusiasm for devolution. The Gordon Brown report has more or less been thrown out by the Labour Party, and your Shadow Secretary of State, only last week, from Cardiff, has totally ruled out any devolution of any powers or in any format to Wales in the coming years. Okay?
Diolch. My trydydd question, the third question, comes from Sarah Archer.
Hiya. I am a member of the Machynlleth Pride Committee, and I've got a question for a friend who can't be here. If elected, what will candidates do to support and protect trans people, both personally and locally? And what pressure would you apply on government if you're elected to support the trans community?
I think I'm going first on it. This question came up at the hustings last night, and I think there's a lot of misinformation going around. The Reform Party is not anti-trans. A very strong tradition in our movement is live and let live. It's an established British value. People live as they wish within the law. We would wish no harm at all on any trans person. I think Jan Morris, one of the first people to transition in the 1970s, people accepted her for who she was, and they valued her really for the contribution of her work, of her writing, her wonderful literature. So no trans person has any basis to fear from a stronger reform movement, or me as your Reform Party Member of Parliament. I'd be an advocate and indeed a protector for trans persons. I have some trans friends. The Reform Party has a number of trans candidates as well. On the broader piece, I do think, and this is probably where I'll get some heckling, I do think we need to focus more on what brings us together. I'm not lying. We need to focus on what brings us together rather than what separates us. And as I say, I think of Jan Morris. She was accepted in a liberal, democratic society. When we focus too much on what divides us, we lose that common element of what brings us together. And that's really what reform advocates for. Oh, I'm not a liar. Okay, again, the audience haven't come to listen to you, they've come to listen to us.
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. If you look at anything sort of related to the Green Party on this, you'll realise that the Green Party is very much pro letting everyone live the way they want to live, and that's my view as well. So we would support people to express themselves however they want. The only thing that one needs to have a bit of a conversation about, and there aren't any black and white answers, is how you deal with things like shared public spaces. I don't have the definitive answer on that, but we just need to have a grown-up conversation to come up with solutions that are acceptable. But yeah, the Green Party is very much in favour of people being who they want to be.
You know, it's curious to hear a Reform Party candidate talking about unity over division, given the given the hatred that Nigel Farage has whipped up over the past 2 decades in British politics. I've never understood Pardon me. So I totally accept people's right to self-ID, and that's Lib Dem policy. And as a Liberal, and as Jeremy sort of articulated as well, I believe that fundamentally people should be able to get on and live their lives so long as they're not causing harm to other people. And I think that should be a basic point that we should all be able to accept. I've never understood the obsession about toilets. If a predatory man wanted to commit an offence, they would do it already, and I've never understood people's obsession about what's in somebody else's knickers, essentially.
The huge rise in hate crime is a huge concern throughout these islands. And one of the fundamental things that has to happen is the way to look at the way the police treats and handles such victims of crime. We would also, as Plaid, end the conversion therapy practices relating to sexuality and gender identity. But on a personal level, I think one of the biggest concerns I have is this polarisation and inability to have mature conversation on these topics. I'm old enough to remember the Greenham Common and other campaigns of the 80s and the fight for women's rights. And yet, politically, these days, it's very, very difficult, without being slandered or called names or obscenities, when anybody in the political sphere has a discussion on this matter. And somehow we have to overcome that urgently.
Thank you. Once again, the only similarity between myself and Oliver is the shirt. I'm very, very pro-trans rights. Being a secondary school teacher in an inner city school and a trade union executive member, you can probably imagine I'm a very thick-skinned person. But the question we had last night is the first time that I've got a bit angry. And I can't remember I think I wrote it down, but it was something like, what would you do to stem the growing trend in trans ideology and uphold biblical teachings? It was something like that. And that did enrage me, if I'm going to be completely honest with you, because I teach in a secondary school. I teach trans children. I see them every day. And it's not a trend. It's not a trend. They're not doing it for a bit of fun. When someone's trans, they're open to being bullied, to being ostracized, to being isolated, and it's just another Tory policy. When they crash the economy and can't talk about the economy, they reach for the 1930s playbook. Look at that trans person over there. Look at that person on a dinghy over there. Don't look at the food banks. That's their policy. That's what they're doing. Don't let them do it to you.
Mae'r cwestiwn nesaf yn dod o Helen Pendry.
Could you please, the audience is not here to listen to you. Can you please stop? This is not the way to conduct democratic debate.
Abby, you're not the only person in the room.
Helen Pendry would like.
You're not the only person in the room. Okay.
Helen Pendry will ask a question.
Helen Pendry has a question.
Well, I think Avi's making a good point that, my question is, do you think the government should stop selling arms to countries like Israel who have been breaking international law for decades? And if your opinion is different from your party line, then please make that clear, because it's fine you saying what you think about these issues and us saying, well, that's great. But if your party and your leadership has different ideas, then, we need to know that if we're going to vote for you.
No, the Green Party has been quite clear on this from the start, and it's something I entirely endorse, that they have been calling for an immediate ceasefire and an immediate end to supplying any more arms to Israel or either side until there is a ceasefire, and I would support to be other sanctions until the sides are brought together. And we need to make sure that the United Nations is allowed to negotiate a fair settlement that allows both sides to exist in freedom and dignity, and that they both have a right to a homeland there. So yes, I would entirely support you, and the Green Party has been pushing for that right from the start, that there should be no more supplying arms to Israel, and we would want an immediate ceasefire.
So yes, Ed Davey, the leader of the Lib Dems, called on the UK Conservative government to suspend arms sales to Israel in light of what's going on in the Middle East at the moment. And I think we're a party that stood up for an immediate ceasefire since the beginning of this conflict. And I think, I totally accept the premise of the question. Actually, I think there are questions that need to be asked to the Labour Party, actually, with this issue, and whether, why they've been so woolly and weak. But essentially, I don't think asking for a ceasefire and asking for the killing to stop should be in any way controversial.
Wel, gai yn lle cynta, diolch I...
Councillor Helen for raising this question. I am quite surprised. This week, this is the fourth Hestings that we had this question about Gaza. And I'm concerned. I feel strongly. I carry the colours of Palestine every day, and to the atrocities that are happening there, this atrocity can't be fathomed. And the people in power are trying to ensure that this war is carried on. The people in power in this country, and it's a shame on them. It's a shame on them, and we have to stop the arms to Israel. That should be stopped straight away.
Thank you. So, since I was selected to be the Labour candidate for Montgomeryshire and Glyndŵr back in November, and one of the first things I was saying was calling for an immediate ceasefire, as was Andy Burnham, as was Sadiq Khan. I've been consistent on that in the months, of 2023 and 2024. I've gone to the Gaza vigils in Llanidloes more often than the one in Machynlleth, because the one in Machynlleth's on a Wednesday, and I'm a full-time teacher, so it's harder for me to get to that one. But the Llanidloes ones, Gaza vigils are at the weekends, and I've been a regular visitor to those. Labour has, a manifesto commitment to recognise an independent Palestinian state, and in relation to weapons, I forget the clause. I think it might be clause 2A. In relation to selling weapons which may be used in a genocide, because you've got to look at the rulings of the international courts. That is something not only would I absolutely oppose categorically, but it's against international law if you are providing weapons, if you are selling weapons that are used in a genocide. So I have been very, very clear and consistent on that throughout.
So the official position of the Reform Party is that there can be no ceasefire until there is the eradication of Hamas. Hamas is a proscribed terrorist organisation. I think that is a noble objective given the heinous nature of the attacks on the 7th of October. That is the party's position. My personal opinion would reflect, and we do by the by respect the rights of both sides in the Arab-Israeli conflict to have a two-state solution. I wholly endorse what Jeremy has said there. In relation to arms, I didn't explain, but my academic specialism is British state failure, and I find every box you open, it comes out with a show of horrors, and I think arms sales is one of those. There are lots of very shady activities going on with our leading arms manufacturers. It has to be made more transparent. New Labour under Mr Blair promised us that there would be whiter than white, purer than pure on these sorts of issues. We do need a seriously mature conversation about the operation of our armaments industry. So I'm wholly in the spirit of what you say in relation to devious arms sales.
The next question, is it the...
Oh, I thought it has Jared.
Yeah. So we've been lucky enough to have a really amazing list of questions from the local sixth formers, from the sixth formers from this school, and this is one of those, I think.
Thank you. My question is about the arts in Wales. There are more and more cuts. There's talks that authors are getting next to nothing, and that libraries and museums are feeling pressure. What's going on?
Thanks very much for the question. Really appreciate it. So it's actually something that's that I'm very passionate about. My eldest sister is a cellist, and my oldest brother is a repetitor. So I'm well aware of talking about sort of arts funding and the state of play. So this is a slight tangent, but also just want to mention actually the way that lots of self-employed musicians were treated in the pandemic. Lots of people missed out on a huge amount of income as a result of COVID, and lots of them have struggled to go back to their profession afterwards. So I just thought I'd just mention that. In Wales, we've had a really tricky time with arts funding. In particular, Arts Council Wales have chosen not to support some organisations locally, which I know are really, really important in Montgomeryshire. So Theatr Havren, for instance, in Newtown had its Arts Council funding cut. I'm a member of the management board at Theatr Havren. So did Mid Wales Opera, which does some fantastic outreach work with secondary schools, and I know that I benefited from that when I was at Llynnoedd High School as well, bringing opera to kids who would never ever get the opportunity to be involved in that sort of kind of music. I'm not sure I've got any answers other than I'm as concerned as that concerned pupil, basically, about the state of arts funding. But basically it's about more cash and Arts Council Wales being properly funded so it can better provide for those services locally here.
Well, obviously, I'm going to say the Barnett formula, but we've already touched on that. But that is fundamental principle, which is relevant not just for the arts, but for all our public sector. But I would draw your attention to a very important report out yesterday from the Cardiff University Welsh Governance Centre. And, it makes worrying reading, because whatever happens after this election, the reality is the Welsh government will have a 1.1% per year real terms increase from 2024 to 2029 as proposed by Labour. Even with consequentials, right, there will be a need of extra 248 million in 25-26. That will, by 28-29, grow to 683 million. So if you think there are problems and pressures now, just wait a few years down the line. And that begs the fundamental question then, as the IFS report, Institute of Fiscal Studies, said the other day, huge concerns are about both the Conservative and Labour tax and spend proposals. And there's a lot of guessing work there, which will continue with the age of austerity, I'm afraid to say.
So I think I've mentioned already, I'm a secondary school drama teacher. I'm head of drama at my school where I've worked for 18 years. I've been the head of drama for over a decade. So as you can probably, this Monday was my first week taking unpaid leave to campaign full time. So I'm only just out of the classroom. As a drama teacher, you can probably imagine, the arts are very, very close to my heart. And you're right, the person who asked the question is correct. It's in a perilous state. Why are we in that position? Why are we where we are? It's the A word. I think Elwyn did mention it, austerity. It's not talked about so often, but we had austerity under David Cameron and Nick Clegg. And then we had, Liz Truss crashing the economy. And when we're saying, we've got to ring-fence funding for doctors, for nurses, for education, what happens? We've got a similar question on sports provision in the Llanidloes High School hustings. When you have a party, a government crash the economy, it's all those things which I hate you because I don't see it this way, but non-essential. That's what people say. If it's not a doctor, if it's not a nurse, if it's not a teacher, those are the things that get cut the most savagely. So we all need to think about why that's happened.
I'm also a published author. My specialism is on the life of George Orwell, and. Yes, the Orwell tour travels through the life and work of George Orwell. It's in bookstops. No, I'm a published author, thank you, on George Orwell. This is a matter of great interest to me. I teach for a French university this spring, and I'm amazed at the quality of public libraries in France. And I feel there's a paucity of standards, really, in terms of our politicians and what they view to be good or bad standards. In the town that I teach in France, the library is like a palace. It's well staffed, it's rammed full of books. Every public library I go to in Britain, I do lots of talks about George Orwell, and there are more computers than books. I sense really so many of our politicians don't live in the real world. Most of you probably won't be surprised to hear that, but so few of them are state educated. It's not just our public libraries provided by the local authority, but also our libraries in our schools. Lots of primary schools don't have proper libraries. They need them. I will fight for those. Thank you.
Yeah, and basically this question is all about public funding. And the thing that I feel about public funding is that we talk about the austerity that is around at the moment, and there is genuine austerity, but there is also plenty of money in society. It's just that it's very unevenly distributed. We're constantly seeing in the media people sitting on enormous stacks of cash, and we need to find a way of making this society more equal, because that unequalness isn't just mean that there's a lack of public funding because we haven't got the taxes, but it also breeds resentment from the people that are living with this austerity to the people that the money they see being splashed around in the sort of higher circles. So we need to find a way of having the tax distributed more fairly, and that way there would be more tax to pay for some of these things like public funding of the arts.
Diolch i chi gyd am eich atebion. Mae'r cwestiwn nesaf o Joe Hope? Nid dim eto? Na. Oh.
Joe Hope, sorry, I was told Carla.
Cwestiwn nesaf o Joe Hope.
No Hope, Joe Hope. Yeah.
Hello. So many people in this constituency have been battling their consciences around the question of tactical voting in this election. And this is basically where we can't vote for the candidate we'd actually like because of a fear that we might get the candidate we really don't want. Where is it? No, anyway. If elected, would the candidate support us disenfranchised voters by arguing in the House for electoral reform to include proportional representation?
Diolch, Joe. Thank you. I think I'll put a bet on it that my colleague here won't win next week. I think also, if I've learned anything in this election, I think polls and all the focus on them should be banned during elections, so that energy and time is focused on policies and substance and real lives and what affects us as human beings. that's the important stuff. Yes, it's applied policy to support STV on all levels of government if and when we can, but specifically on UK level, we've seen the danger that we might well see a huge sway again of one party dominating politics in these islands, and whichever colour you are, that's not healthy and has to be changed.
Yeah, someone's actually said that to my face. I don't like you best, but I am voting for you because you're the tactical vote. So I didn't take it personally, and I was grateful for the vote. So yes, so the constituency's changed. It's not Montgomeryshire anymore. It's Montgomeryshire and Glyndŵr. We've got all of South and West Wrexham County Borough in the constituency. That's 35% of the vote. I think it's 34.81% of the voting population. And it's a Labour-leaning area, so it makes a massive, massive, massive difference. And as I said earlier, feel free to not believe me. Just look at electoral calculus, Best for Britain, Stop the Tories, Stop Vote. Any website you want to go on, they're all saying pretty much the same thing. But yeah, I can see you hurrying me along because you want to hear my views on proportional representation. Yes, I support it. Yes, I am in favour. This gives me an opportunity to respond to some things that were said earlier. In our manifesto, we have reform of the House of Commons and the House of Lords. It's a disgrace that we have an unelected upper chamber. We need an elected upper chamber.
We absolutely do need an elected upper chamber, but as I say, the Labour Party have been promising since 1935 to sort the House of Lords out, and they haven't done it. So Reform is committed to abolition of the House of Lords and its replacement with an elected Senate. The Labour Party often likes to describe itself as being the progressive party. I'm very interested in what they've done in Wales, by giving local authorities just the option to introduce STV for election to our local authorities, rather than saying every local authority in Wales will elect their councillors via STV, which is what the Scots did. Very successful in Scotland. Much better quality of debate, much better quality of scrutiny by introducing STV as a compulsory measure across all Scottish local authorities. So Wales has to do that for its local authorities. Labour has not done that. It's given local authorities the option, a very bizarre approach. And of course, at Westminster, a form of proportional representation is absolutely essential. Reform, lots of you clearly, are critics of us, but we do stand for reform of our political system. I see us as the successors to the Chartists and the suffragists in that regard. Political reform. You can laugh all you wish. But we're the fastest growing political party in Britain, so we're clearly doing something correct. So we need systemic political reform, and reform will deliver that. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes, I said suffragists. Do you know the difference between a suffragette and a suffragist? I said the suffragist.
Thanks for the question. Yes, the Green Party is.
Well, you misquoted me.
Can we?
Really are appalling.
We're here to listen to each other. Thank you.
Yeah, you won't be surprised to know that the Green Party is very much in favour of proportional representation, and we've been arguing for it for a long time. In this election, we look as if we're on course for the winning party to end up with about 70% of the seats, with maybe 40% of the popular vote, which is not democracy by any way. The people that try and defend first past the post often say that it's the best system because it keeps the local aspect of politics, that you have an MP that is local to you in a small constituency. But I don't actually take that argument. If I have a local MP in my local constituency, only one, and they are ideologically opposite ends of the spectrum to me, I don't really feel I can engage with them. I would far sooner have a larger constituency with several MPs and be able to choose which MP I wanted to engage with. So that is not a valid argument whatsoever. We should have PR, and I hope it gets introduced soon.
Thank you very, very much for the question, and I'm really glad that I got the opportunity to mention PR earlier on in the debate, and the poison in particular that safe seats have on our politics more generally. It's a basic rule that every vote should count the same wherever you live in the country, and that you're not forced to vote for the least worst option. I think, Steve said the Labour Party are in favour of reform of the House of Commons. I don't think there's anything on proportional representation in the Labour manifesto. And as I've said to you previously, the Labour Party always talk about it when they're in opposition. And then when they get into government, they forget about it, because fundamentally, the two-party system benefits them. I remember in 1998, they set up the Jenkins Commission to get Roy Jenkins to look into PR, and then they just forget about the whole lot. You only have to look at their botched reorganisation of the Senedd, helped by Plaid Cymru, in fact, where they're introducing a less proportional voting system. And then one last, I'm going to have a go at all of them now. One last one. Elwyn said he's in favour of PR at every single layer of government. Then why didn't you vote for it when Lib Dems on Paris County Council proposed it? We got that passed. Plaid Cymru voted against it.
I've had a request for a very quick right to reply, because we're getting towards the end now.
I take it as a compliment, this rapier-like cut and thrust that everyone's gunning for Labour. So I just wanted to sort of respond to some of it. Look at our record in the Senedd. We introduced proportional representation. The Senedd is proportional representation. That I would say, Plaid has been a far bigger beneficiary of that than Labour. It wasn't done, to benefit us. In the early days, the Lib Dems as well, before their vote share has successively declined in Welsh elections. And I don't know what more I can say. I support PR. Just look at what I said about votes for 16 and 17-year-olds. We've done it in the Senedd. We are committed to reform. And, if I am elected as a Welsh Labour MP going to Westminster, these are the kind of things I would be pushing really, really hard for. So, and thank you for giving me right to reply. I appreciate that.
Gair sydyn, achos o'n i'n dod at y diwedd.
Well, just two facts, actually. In relation to the proposed, actual changes that will be happening with the Senedd elections, the reason they are what they are is because Mark Drakeford couldn't get the STV proposals through the Labour Party. And that is fact, because I was in the meeting. And as relates to Powys County Council, there's a threshold needed before you can get STV implemented at local authority level in Wales. It's a clause put in by the Labour government in Wales as a way of ensuring it doesn't happen.
Just very quickly, Elwyn, you had an opportunity to vote for it and you chose not to.
The very last question is from Carlos.
Well, if you get elected, would you work to ensure the UK takes its fair share of asylum seekers? And please, in your answer, consider how your party, if you got to the government, would deal with the Channel crosses.
We didn't hear you Carlos, we didn't hear you very well. Would you mind saying it again? Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, I'll put it closer. So, if you get elected, would you work to ensure the UK takes its fair share of asylum seekers? And if your party got to the government, what would they do to deal with the Channel crosses?
I heard the first part. Yes, so in one of my previous answers, I talked about the 1930s playbook that the Conservatives have reached for after they crashed the economy and could no longer talk about economic stewardship of the country. They now try and vilify minorities, the trans community, people on dinghies. So it's a very timely question. Again, one of the big disagreements that I have with Oliver's party is this desire for net zero immigration. I think that is a very, very bizarre policy. You know, my wife is an NHS cancer services worker. My sister's currently retraining to be a nurse. And the number of vacancies that we have, you know, in the public, as a teacher, I see it in schools, you know, the union rep, I go around, you know, schools, there are loads and loads of vacancies. So we need immigration to this country. Immigrants should be made to feel welcome. And asylum seekers, refugees, should be treated with the utmost respect. They should have safe crossings. You know, they should have... They need safe routes. You know, you have to ask yourself, why are these people making these perilous, you know, attempts to cross the channel? It's because there are no safe routes. There's no safe way to apply for asylum. And the Rwanda plan is a disgusting gimmick. And I'm very, very proud that the Labour Party is committed to chucking it in the bin. It will be gone if we win the election. Thank you.
So I'm very glad that we all agree the Rwanda plan is absolutely crazy and should be abolished. I can't believe the British state has spent £300 million of our money on such a bizarre and ridiculous scheme. That said, Reform does not object to third-party country processing. It's a very successful model that was used in Australia to reduce illegal immigration. I would argue that since the 1990s, the true victims of our immigration crisis have been genuine refugees. And I say genuine refugees because when economic migrants are abusing the asylum system, you are thereby preventing the number of genuine refugees that Britain can take. No one would object. No one in the Reform would object to a genuine refugee who requires a safe haven. The issue with the boat people is that their asylum applications have been failed by the French government. So the French government has said you do not have a legitimate... you can debate... That is true. That is categorically true. So and there is no civil war in France. There is no civil war in France. France is a safe country. The French government has failed their asylum claims, and they are then... Okay. Well, these people, many of them have had their asylum applications in France rejected. They're coming to Britain because they know Britain will not deport them because their applications have been failed. As I say, the biggest victims of all of this are the genuine refugees that Britain should be taking, and we're not because we're accepting people who are economic migrants. The largest number of boat people coming from Albania. Albania is not in civil war. It's a safe country. So that is true. It is true. It is true. We need to make sure that immigration is the primary duty of the state to control our borders and to keep our people safe, okay? So we need to make sure that if you migrate to the United Kingdom, you do so lawfully. It's a basic principle of the rule of law, okay? We don't have rule of the mob in this country. It seems to me from some of the conduct of people tonight, you like the rule of the mob. We don't. We abide by the rule of law. The rule of law in this country, and that is what Reform is all about. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. The Green Party's view on this is that we need to work with our international neighbours to set up safe routes so that people don't have to risk their lives on tiny boats crossing the channel. So I'm very much with Steve on that. Migrants and refugees have done a lot to enrich our society, and they've provided a very important sort of a source of labour and employment in the past. So we should welcome them to our channel. And no one becomes a refugee out of choice. They are fleeing from terror and war and starvation, and there are going to be more created because of climate change as well. There are going to be more starvation and so on, and we're going to have more migrants caused because of the actions of us sort of rich Western countries pumping out carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So we need to treat them with dignity and respect and have a dignified way of assessing their status, and if there are economic migrants, then they can be sort of potentially returned, but for genuine refugees, we need to show compassion.
I'm going to agree with a lot of what's been already said by Jeremy and Steve, and absolutely we need safe and legal routes for those people who want to apply for asylum here in the UK. I think it's a sad indictment of the Conservative Party that they have it seems like the further they've fallen in the polls, the more desperate they've become to demonise every single minority under the sun. And they've done so. And they've done so because they've been worried about the threat from the right, from Nigel Farage and the Reform Party. And we're seeing them actually, I think, at one of their lowest ebbs, well, in my lifetime certainly, but maybe in a lot longer time period. And sorry, I'm not going to say something very positive now, but I'm actually really frightened about what happens to our politics if the Conservative Party completely collapses and disintegrates. Because actually what might come from the ashes might be something a whole lot worse and a whole lot scarier for a lot of people who are minorities in this country. And just imagine, just from a public policy point of view, had we spent that money, instead of spending it on a tasteless gimmick, essentially, and spent that money instead on processing the asylum applications that we already have. And one last point. It won't surprise you to hear that I was fervently opposed to Brexit. It's one of the reasons I joined the Liberal Democrats is because I believe in the European project and believe in the EU and hope that we'll be able to rejoin one day. It strikes me that actually when you've got an issue across the English Channel that actually maybe pissing off our closest neighbours and allies in France was not the most sensible thing to do.
Let's be proud of one thing in Wales, is the declaration by the Senedd to make us a nation of sanctuary. There's three things I would like to see happening. We should support the Migration Advisory Committee's recommendations and make them into action. But if we are serious about going to the root causes of this issue, we need to stop selling bombs to all over the world. We need to change our economy. We need to stop undermining countries in the Middle East and North Africa. And if we're serious about climate change, we need to tackle the root issues and huge issues in Central Africa, which is forcing millions of people further north and towards Europe. If we are serious, that's what we should be focusing on.
Felly, da ni wedi dod I diwedd...
To the end of the questions. We're coming to the end of the questions now. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And for you, as the audience as well. And for the questions. There was quite an awful lot of questions on various subjects.
Do you have time to talk at the end for a few moments, perhaps to people who maybe haven't had their question answered or have more questions after what you've said? And thank you to Ysgol Bro-Hyddgen am gael ni fan hyn, a diolch I gyd o'r gwirfoddolwyr.
Come here.
Gyd.
Arrange people that's been arranging the event. And for the translation and the... please put your translations off.